Blonde woman pays for a Hell's Angels gas. The next day, dozens of bikers show up at her door. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gas station's worn concrete as Samantha Cole pulled her blue sedan up to pump number 4. The familiar scent of gasoline and the quiet hum of the convenience store's fluorescent lights created a peaceful atmosphere that matched her relatively calm day. She stepped out of her car, her blonde hair catching the golden sunlight. The day had been filled with ordinary tasks, ordering fresh flowers for the shop, arranging deliveries, and now running errands. Yet beneath the surface of her well-ordered life, a familiar emptiness gnawed at her heart. Samantha inserted her credit card into the pump and watched the numbers tick upward. Her flower shop was doing well, and from the outside, everything looked perfect. But returning to an empty house each evening had begun to wear on her. The quiet moments like these, performing mundane tasks alone, only amplified her loneliness. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now, back to the story. The rumble of a motorcycle drew her attention as it pulled into the station. A massive machine, gleaming chrome and polished black, rolled up to the pump across from her. Its rider was even more imposing, a mountain of a man with a thick beard and arms covered in intricate tattoos. His leather vest bore the unmistakable patches of the Hell's Angels. Samantha tried not to stare, but she couldn't help noticing how the man's massive hands, rough and weathered, fumbled with a small pile of crumpled bills. His shoulders were tense, and his breathing seemed heavy with frustration as he counted and recounted the money. The biker's presence commanded attention, yet there was something vulnerable in the way he stood there, struggling with what appeared to be insufficient funds. Despite his intimidating appearance, the skull rings on his fingers and the fierce wolf tattooed on his forearm, Samantha saw past the rough exterior to recognize a familiar kind of distress. She felt her heart squeeze with empathy. How many times had she wished for someone to notice when she was struggling? The man muttered something under his breath, his deep voice carrying a note of defeat that struck a chord within her. Taking a deep breath, Samantha removed the nozzle from her car. Her hands trembled slightly as she secured the gas cap, but her voice remained steady when she spoke. "Excuse me," she called out, taking a few steps toward him. The man's head snapped up, his dark eyes meeting hers with surprise. Up close, he was even more intimidating, but Samantha pressed on. "I couldn't help but notice. Would you like some help with the gas?" The biker straightened to his full height, and Samantha had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. For a moment, he just stared at her, his expression unreadable beneath his beard, and the shadows cast by the setting sun. "That's real kind of you, ma'am," he finally replied, his voice gruff but gentle. "But I can't accept—" "Please," Samantha interrupted, offering a warm smile. "I'd like to help, if you'll let me." Another moment passed, heavy with silence, before the man's shoulders relaxed slightly. He nodded, a simple gesture that carried more gratitude than words could express. "Thank you," he said quietly, tucking the worn bills back into his pocket. "Not many people would offer help to someone like me." Samantha leaned against her car while the biker filled his tank, watching the numbers climb on the digital display. The late afternoon breeze carried the sweet scent of nearby flowering dogwoods, helping to mask the sharp smell of gasoline. "Beautiful evening," she commented, breaking the somewhat awkward silence. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The biker nodded, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the concrete. "Sure is. Been riding since dawn, and this is the prettiest sunset I've seen all day." His voice, though deep and gravelly, had a gentle quality that put her at ease. "You've been on the road that long?" Samantha asked, genuinely curious. She couldn't imagine spending an entire day on a motorcycle, exposed to the elements. He adjusted his grip on the gas pump handle, the silver rings on his fingers catching the light. Yeah, heading up north for a meetup with some brothers. He paused, then added, "Other riders, I mean." Samantha noticed how his shoulders had relaxed since their initial interaction. The tension that had been evident in his posture while counting money had melted away. "Well, I hope the weather holds up for you. The forecast mentioned possible rain tomorrow." "Wouldn't be the first time I've ridden in the rain," he chuckled, the sound surprisingly warm. "Though I appreciate the heads up. Most folks see someone like me and cross to the other side of the street." The pump clicked off, and he carefully replaced the nozzle. "You know, it means a lot, what you did here. Kind of restores my faith in people." He wiped his hands on a bandana pulled from his back pocket. "World needs more folks like you." Samantha felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "It's nothing, really. Just trying to help where I can." She pushed off from her car, fishing her keys from her purse. The encounter had been surprisingly pleasant, nothing like what she might have expected from meeting a Hell's Angel at a gas station. As she turned toward her driver's side door, his voice called out behind her. "Hey, I'm Griff," he said, his tone earnest. "Don't think I could have gotten this far without your help." Samantha turned back, offering him a genuine smile. "I'm glad I could help, Griff. Have a safe ride." The simple act of kindness had left her feeling lighter somehow, though she didn't dwell on it. She slipped into her car, started the engine, and pulled, away from the pump, already thinking about the evening ahead and the orders she needed to prepare for tomorrow's deliveries. Through her rearview mirror, she caught a final glimpse of Griff, still standing by his motorcycle, watching her drive away. The image soon faded as she turned onto the main road, and she figured that would be the end of their brief encounter. Samantha sat at her kitchen table, warming her hands around her first cup of coffee. The morning sun filtered through her lace curtains, casting delicate shadows across the worn wooden surface. She loved these quiet moments before the day truly began, before she had to head to the flower shop and tackle her growing list of orders. Taking a sip of coffee, she closed her eyes, savoring the rich aroma. The peaceful morning silence suddenly shattered as a deep rumble filled the air. At first, she thought it might be thunder, but the sound grew steadily louder, more mechanical. Her china cabinet began to rattle slightly. Motorcycle engines. Setting down her cup with trembling hands, Samantha rushed to her front window. The sight before her made her jaw drop. Dozens of motorcycles lined both sides of her normally quiet residential street, their chrome fixtures gleaming in the morning light. Harley-Davidsons of every style and color stretched as far as she could see, and atop each one sat a leather-clad rider. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she recognized the lead rider, Griff. His massive frame was unmistakable, even from a distance. He sat astride a sleek black motorcycle at the head of the pack, his presence commanding and impossible to ignore. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, pressing her hand against the window pane. Her neighbors were already peeking through their curtains, some even stepping onto their porches to get a better look at the extraordinary scene unfolding on their quiet street. The engines cut off one by one, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Samantha's legs felt wobbly as she made her way to her front door. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Taking a deep breath, she opened it and stepped onto her small porch. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of leather and motor oil. Dozens of faces turned toward her, weathered faces, scarred faces, bearded faces, all watching her with unexpected warmth in their eyes. Many of the bikers wore patches identifying them as members of the Hell's Angels, their leather vests decorated with various badges and insignias. Griff dismounted his bike with surprising grace for such a large man. In his massive hands, he held a gorgeous bouquet of wildflowers, not the kind you'd find in a typical flower shop, but the sort that grew freely along country roads. The colorful blooms looked almost comically delicate in his grip. Her front yard, usually empty save for her carefully tended garden, now hosted what looked like the entire local chapter of the Hells Angels. The morning sun caught on their bikes' chrome fixtures, sending sparkles of light dancing across her lawn. Griff approached her porch, his boots crunching on the gravel path. A smile spread across his face, partially hidden by his beard, but evident in the crinkles around his eyes. "You helped me out yesterday," he said, his deep voice carrying clearly in the morning quiet. "So we came to return the favor." As if on cue, the rest of the bikers began dismounting their motorcycles. To Samantha's amazement, each one carried something: more flowers, mason jars filled with what looked like homemade preserves, tools, and various other items. Some carried lumber and hardware that seemed meant for repairs. She stood frozen on her porch, one hand still gripping the doorframe, as the group of leather-clad angels approached her house, their arms full of gifts and their faces bright with genuine warmth. Samantha watched in amazement as the bikers moved with surprising organization, setting up a folding table they'd somehow brought along. The morning sun had grown stronger now, warming the spring air as they worked. The table sat just outside her flower shop, its weathered wood surface soon covered with their offerings: jars of golden honey, homemade preserves, and tools of all sorts. "I really don't know what to say," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The sight of these tough-looking men, covered in tattoos and leather, arranging mason jars with such care made her heart swell with unexpected emotion. A shorter biker with salt and pepper hair stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Dutch," he said with a friendly grin. "Been riding with these boys for 20 years now." His handshake was firm but gentle. "That jam there? My wife made it special when she heard what you did for our brother Griff." One by one, they introduced themselves: Bear, Tank, Whiskey, Hawk, their road names matching their appearances in ways that made Samantha smile, despite her nervousness. Each had a story to share, and she found herself drawn into their world, so different from her own quiet life among the flowers. "You should have seen Griff when he first showed up," Tank said, his massive arms crossed over his chest. He was easily as tall as Griff, but carried himself with a gentler demeanor. "Kid was rough around the edges, weren't you, brother?" Griff nodded, leaning against the table. "Was heading down a bad road before I found these guys," he admitted, his deep voice carrying a note of reflection. "Started running with the wrong crowd when I was just 15. Thought I knew everything. You know how it is." He paused, looking at the ground. "These men showed me what real brotherhood means." The other bikers nodded in agreement, and Samantha noticed how they unconsciously moved closer to Griff as he spoke, like a family drawing together to support one of their own. The gesture touched something deep inside her, reminding her of the loneliness she'd been carrying for so long. "Would you all like to come in for some coffee?" she heard herself asking, surprising herself with the invitation. "I make a pretty mean brew, and I've got some fresh muffins I baked yesterday." The bikers exchanged glances, and Griff's face broke into a warm smile. "We'd be honored, ma'am," he said, and the others murmured in agreement. Soon, Samantha's small shop was filled with the unlikely sight of leather-clad bikers perched carefully on her delicate cafe chairs, holding floral-patterned mugs with surprising gentleness. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the various flowers on display and filling the space with warm, colored light. "See, the thing about brotherhood," Griff said, cradling his coffee mug in his large hands. "It's more than just riding together or wearing the same patches. It's about having each other's backs, no matter what." He looked around at his fellow bikers, who nodded in agreement. Loyalty. That's everything to us. When someone shows kindness to one of us, they show kindness to all of us. The others murmured in agreement, and Samantha felt tears pricking at her eyes. She tried to hide them by busying herself with the coffee pot, but she could feel the genuine warmth and appreciation radiating from these unexpected guests. Despite her initial fear and uncertainty, she found herself feeling more seen and appreciated than she had in years. The morning sun filtered through the shop windows, casting rainbow patterns from the crystal vases onto the wooden floor. Samantha arranged a bouquet of pink roses, her fingers working with practiced precision. The familiar rumble of motorcycles drew her attention, and she smiled despite herself. Over the past few days, the sound had become oddly comforting. 3 bikes pulled up outside, Griff's unmistakable black machine in the lead. He ducked through the doorway, his massive frame somehow managing to avoid disturbing any of the delicate arrangements. Behind him, Tank and Dutch carried their toolboxes. "That leak in your roof ain't gonna fix itself," Tank announced, heading straight for the back room where water had been dripping during yesterday's rain. Samantha watched them work throughout the day. Tank and Dutch tackled the roof with efficiency, while Griff stayed below, helping her move heavy boxes and reaching the highest shelves she'd never been able to access. The shop slowly transformed. Broken fixtures mended, loose floorboards secured, even the stubborn front door that always stuck was fixed. As the afternoon wore on, more bikers dropped by. Some brought food, others offered help, and a few simply sat and chatted while she worked. Their presence, initially overwhelming, had become almost natural. They treated her flowers with surprising gentleness, asking questions about different arrangements and sharing stories about their own gardens. When evening approached, Tank and Dutch packed up their tools, satisfied with their repairs. "No more leaks," Dutch declared proudly, "though we might need to check it again after the next rain, just to be sure." As the sun set, Griff remained behind, helping Samantha with a particularly challenging wedding arrangement. His large hands looked out of place among the delicate white orchids, but he followed her instructions carefully, holding stems in place while she worked. "You've got a real talent," he said, watching her weave baby's breath through the arrangement. "Way you put these together, it's like telling a story." Samantha's hands slowed, and she felt the weight of unsaid words pressing against her chest. The shop had grown quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigeration units and the fading daylight. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone sees it that way," she admitted, setting down her scissors. "I pour my heart into these arrangements, but most days it feels like I'm just invisible." Her voice caught slightly. No family to share it with, no one. Who really understands? Griff remained silent, his presence steady and patient. Encouraged by his quiet attention, Samantha continued, "My mother died when I was young. Dad, well, he checked out long before that. Some days I look around this shop and wonder if I'm fooling myself, if it's all going to fall apart." She blinked back tears, embarrassed by her sudden vulnerability, but Griff's expression held no judgment, only understanding. "Lost my old man to the bottle when I was 12, he shared, his deep voice gentle. "Mom worked 3 jobs, barely saw her, ended up running with street gangs by 14. He touched one of the orchid petals carefully. "Thought I was tough, but I was just lost. These guys, the angels, they showed me what real family means." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "You're not alone anymore, Samantha. Whatever you need, we've got your back. That's what family does." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with promise and sincerity. Samantha felt something shift inside her, like a long locked door finally opening. The morning started like any other at Samantha's flower shop. She was arranging a display of fresh sunflowers when Mrs. Henderson, one of her regular customers, pushed through the door. The elderly woman's face was pinched with concern, her flowered dress swishing as she approached the counter. "Samantha, dear," Mrs. Henderson's voice dropped to a whisper, though they were alone in the shop. "I've been meaning to talk to you about those people." Samantha's hands stilled on the sunflower stems. "Which people, Mrs. Henderson?" "Those bikers." She said the word like it might summon them. "It's not right. Them hanging around here all the time. What will people think?" Before Samantha could respond, the bell chimed again. Sarah Miller, who owned the bakery down the street, walked in with a similar worried expression. "I'm so glad you're here," Sarah said, clutching her purse. "We've all been talking, and we're concerned about you." Samantha felt her cheeks grow warm. "There's really nothing to be concerned about." "But there is," Mrs. Henderson insisted. "Just yesterday, my grandson told me about how those Hell's Angels were involved in all sorts of trouble up north. Fighting, drinking." She shuddered delicately. Sarah nodded vigorously. "And that big one, what's his name?" "Griff. He looks absolutely terrifying with all those tattoos. I saw him carrying boxes into your shop yesterday. What if he's trying to get close to you for other reasons?" Samantha thought about Griff's gentle handling of her delicate flowers, how he'd spent hours helping her reorganize her storage room, asking nothing in return. "You don't know him," she said quietly. "That's exactly the point, dear." Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "None of us know them, and in a town like this, that's dangerous." Throughout the day, more neighbors stopped by. Some were subtle, asking roundabout questions about her new friends. Others were more direct, like Bill Thompson from the hardware store. "Those bikes are scaring away my customers," he complained. "And the noise. It's not good for business, Samantha. Not good at all." By closing time, Samantha's head was spinning. She sat at her work table, absently turning a rose between her fingers. The petals were perfect, unblemished, just like her reputation had been before the bikers arrived. She thought about how Griff and his friends had transformed her shop, fixed things she couldn't afford to repair. How they brought her coffee in the mornings and checked on her late at night. How they treated her like family when she'd been alone for so long. But the townspeople's words echoed in her mind. What if they were right? What if accepting help from the bikers would only lead to trouble? She'd worked hard to build her business, to create a place for herself in this community. The rose slipped from her fingers, landing softly on the table. Outside, she heard the familiar rumble of motorcycles passing by. Some of her customers had already started canceling orders, making excuses about trying something different. The whispers followed her at the grocery store, at church, even at the post office. Samantha stood and walked to the window, watching the street where Griff and his friends usually parked. Their kindness had meant everything to her, but now she wondered if it would come at too high a price. The thought of losing their friendship made her chest ache, but the fear of losing everything she'd built left her feeling equally hollow. She touched the window glass, cool against her fingertips, and let out a heavy sigh. The simple act of kindness at the gas station had grown into something far more complicated than she'd ever imagined. The morning mail brought more than just bills and advertisements. Samantha's hands trembled as she held the official envelope from the town council. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that usually meant trouble. She settled into her worn office chair behind the counter where fresh roses perfumed the air. The letter opener sliced cleanly through the envelope, and she unfolded the crisp paper inside. "Dear Miss Cole, she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. It has come to our attention that numerous complaints have been filed regarding your business establishment. Her heart sank as she continued reading. The words blurred together. Concerning associations, community standards, public safety concerns, and finally, the punch to the gut. Potential review of your operating license. Samantha set the letter down on her desk, her fingers pressing against her temples. The morning sunlight streamed through the shop windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Everything looked the same, yet somehow different, threatening. The bell above the door chimed, and she quickly stuffed the letter into her desk drawer. Mrs. Peterson walked in, nose held high, and promptly walked out again when she saw Samantha. The silent judgment stung worse than any words could have. Hours crawled by. Samantha mechanically arranged bouquets, her mind constantly returning to the letter hidden in her drawer. When the familiar rumble of Griff's motorcycle approached, her stomach twisted into knots. The bell chimed again, and Griff's massive frame filled the doorway. He was carrying a paper bag that smelled of fresh pastries, their morning ritual for the past few weeks. "Morning, sunshine," he said, his deep voice gentle despite his intimidating appearance. "Brought your favorite, those cinnamon things you like." But today, Samantha couldn't manage her usual smile. Her hands shook as she pulled the letter from her drawer and held it out to him. Griff set down the pastry bag and took the letter, his weathered hands careful with the paper. His expression darkened as he read, jaw tightening beneath his beard. "They can't do this," he said, finally, but his voice held a note of uncertainty. "Can't they?" Samantha's voice cracked. "The council has always been strict about licenses, and now, with all these complaints..." She gestured helplessly at the empty shop. "My regular customers aren't coming anymore. People cross the street when they see me coming." Griff's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Sam, I've worked so hard for this shop," she continued, tears threatening to spill. "It's all I have. After Mom died, this place became my whole world. I can't lose it, Griff. I just can't." Griff moved around the counter, his heavy boots surprisingly quiet on the wooden floor. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and Samantha found herself leaning into the touch, seeking comfort. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You're not going to lose anything. These small-minded people with their precious opinions, they don't matter. What matters is who you are, and you're one of the best people I've ever met. But the license..." "Let me handle it," Griff interrupted. "You showed kindness to a stranger without judgment. That means something to me, to all of us, and we take care of our own." Samantha looked up at him, seeing the determination in his eyes. "Trust me," he said, squeezing her shoulder. "My loyalty isn't just words. We're going to fix this, together." The afternoon sun filtered through the shop windows as Griff paced back and forth, his heavy boots creaking against the wooden floor. Around him, half a dozen bikers lounged on mismatched chairs they'd dragged in from the back room. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and fresh flowers. "We need to show them who we really are," Griff said, stopping to lean against the counter. "Not what they think we are." Bear, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard, nodded thoughtfully. "People only see the patches and leather. They don't see the food drives we do, or the toy runs for kids at Christmas." Samantha sat behind her work desk, absently turning a pink carnation between her fingers. The morning's letter still weighed heavily on her mind, but seeing these men, these supposed troublemakers, gathered in her shop to help her sparked something warm in her chest. "What if..." Griff's eyes lit up. "What if we organize a charity event, right here in town? Show everyone what we're really about." Tank, the youngest of the group, perked up. Like that benefit we did last year for the Children's Hospital? Exactly, Griff said, turning to Samantha. We could set up right here in front of your shop. Live music, food, games for the kids. All proceeds go to local causes, maybe the food bank, or that youth center that's been struggling. Samantha set down the carnation, her brow furrowed. I don't know, Griff. The council's already breathing down my neck. A big event might make things worse. Or it could change their minds, said Marie, one of the few female bikers. She had been quietly arranging flowers, with Samantha all morning. Sometimes people just need to see things with their own eyes to understand. The others murmured in agreement. Samantha looked around at their earnest faces, these people who had become her unexpected friends. They weren't the hardened criminals the town believed them to be. They were people who understood loyalty and community better than most. We could call it Blooms and Bikes for Better Lives, Bear suggested, grinning at his own cleverness. Despite her anxiety, Samantha couldn't help but smile. That's actually not bad. Think about it, Sam, Griff said softly. Your flowers, our bikes, good music, good food. Show them we can all work together to help others. That's got to count for something. Samantha stood up and walked to her calendar on the wall. The summer festival is in 3 weeks. Everyone will be out and about then anyway. Perfect timing, Griff said. We can set up right here on Main Street. The guys know musicians who will play for free, and I bet we could get some food trucks involved. I could do special arrangements, Samantha said, warming to the idea. Maybe teach some simple flower arranging workshops for the kids. The energy in the room shifted as everyone began throwing out ideas. Marie suggested face painting, while Tank offered to organize a motorcycle safety demonstration. Bear started making lists of local businesses they could approach for support. So, Griff said, looking at Samantha with hopeful eyes. What do you say? Are you in? Samantha looked around her shop, at the flowers that had always been her sanctuary, at these unlikely friends who had brought new life to her world. Maybe this was exactly what they all needed. Yes, she said firmly. Let's do it. The room erupted in cheers. Griff pulled out his phone to start making calls, while Bear and Tank headed out to spread the word among their other chapters. Marie stayed behind to help Samantha sketch out ideas for flower arrangements. That would complement the event. For the first time since receiving the council's letter, Samantha felt truly hopeful. She began jotting down notes about which flowers would be in season, already visualizing how she could transform her little corner of Main Street into something magical. The week leading up to the event buzzed with activity. Samantha watched in amazement as her usually quiet parking lot transformed into a hub of organized chaos. Bikers moved with purpose, setting up tables and marking spaces for vendor stalls with bright chalk lines on the asphalt. "Watch your step there," called Marie, carrying a bundle of extension cords. Her leather vest was covered in a fine layer of dust from the morning's work. "Tank's running power lines for the stage lights." Samantha nodded, carefully stepping over the orange cables. She'd learned more about the bikers in the past few days than she had in all the weeks before. Marie, she discovered, was a former nurse who still volunteered at free clinics. Tank had graduated from engineering school before finding his calling with the Angels. Each of them had a story that challenged everything she thought she knew about bikers. "Need any help with those?" Samantha asked, pointing to Marie's load. "Nah, I got it. But could you check on Bear? He's been muttering about the food truck layout for an hour." Bear stood near the street, scratching his beard as he studied a hand-drawn map. Despite his intimidating size, he'd shown himself to be meticulous in his planning. "The BBQ truck needs more space," he explained when Samantha approached, "and the ice cream guy wants shade for his generator." "We could move them under the oak tree," Samantha suggested, pointing to the massive tree at the corner of her lot. That would solve both problems. Smart thinking, Flower Girl, Bear grinned, using the nickname that had stuck after their first meeting. Throughout the morning, more bikers arrived. Some brought donated items for the raffle. Others helped with construction. Samantha found herself drawn into conversations, learning bits and pieces of their lives. One member, nicknamed Poet, turned out to be a retired English teacher. Another, Doc, still maintained his dental practice while riding with the club. Inside her shop, Samantha worked on special arrangements for the event. She'd decided on bright, cheerful bouquets that would catch the eye without being overwhelming. The bell above the door chimed, and Griff walked in, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Stage is almost done," he announced, settling onto a stool near her work table. "The guys from the Phoenix chapter are bringing the sound equipment tomorrow." Samantha's hand stilled over the roses she was trimming. "That's a long ride just to help with our little event." "That's what family does," Griff said simply. "Besides, they're excited. It's not every day we get to show people who we really are." A knot formed in Samantha's stomach as she thought about the upcoming event. Everything seemed to be falling into place, maybe too perfectly. She'd learned the hard way that things rarely went as planned. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been growing alongside her excitement. "What if the council tries to shut us down, or nobody shows up, or—" "Hey," Griff interrupted gently. He reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Look outside." Through the window, Samantha could see the parking lot bustling with activity. Marie was teaching Tank how to hang streamers. Bear had somehow convinced Poet to help him move tables. Everyone worked together with an easy familiarity that spoke of years of trust and friendship. "See all that?" Griff asked. "That's not just for show. That's real people coming together to do something good. The town's gonna see that, too." "You really think so?" "I know so." Griff squeezed her hand before letting go. "This event's going to work because it's coming from the right place, from people helping people. That's something even the council can't argue with." Samantha nodded, feeling some of her anxiety ease. She returned to her flowers, but now she worked with renewed purpose, determined to make everything perfect for the big day. The morning sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink as Samantha stood in front of her flower shop, taking in the transformed parking lot. Colorful banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the aroma of coffee and fresh pastries wafted from the food trucks lined up along the perimeter. "We did it," she whispered to herself, watching as the first guests began trickling in. Griff appeared beside her, wearing a clean black t-shirt that showed off his tattoos. "Looks good, doesn't it?" He gestured toward the makeshift stage where a local band was setting up their equipment. Marie rushed past them, carrying a box of raffle tickets. "People are already asking about the prizes," she called out excitedly. "I think we're going to sell out before noon." As the morning progressed, the crowd grew steadily. Families with children explored the vendor stalls. Elderly couples sat at picnic tables enjoying BBQ, and teenagers gathered near the stage. The bikers mingled easily with the townspeople, their leather vests now seeming less intimidating in the cheerful atmosphere. Samantha's heart swelled as she watched Bear patiently explaining motorcycle mechanics to a group of wide-eyed kids. Nearby, Doc had set up a dental hygiene information booth, handing out free toothbrushes and friendly advice. Even Tank, usually so quiet, was giving children rides on his carefully parked motorcycle, their delighted squeals mixing with the music. "Miss Cole!" a familiar voice called out. Mrs. Peterson, one of her regular customers, approached with a warm smile. "This is wonderful. I had no idea these fellows were so, well, nice." Samantha beamed. "They're amazing people, Mrs. Peterson. They've helped me more than I can say." The event was in full swing by early afternoon. The band played upbeat tunes while people danced and laughed. The raffle had indeed sold out, and the donation box for the local children's hospital was overflowing. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. Then she noticed him, Harold Burton, owner of the largest real estate agency in town, pushing through the crowd with his face twisted in anger. He marched straight toward the stage where Griff was helping adjust the sound equipment. "This is unacceptable." Burton's voice boomed across the lot, causing heads to turn. "These criminals have no business being in our town." The music scratched to a halt. Samantha's stomach dropped as she hurried toward the confrontation. "Sir," Griff said calmly, stepping down from the stage, "this is a charity event. We're raising money for the children's hospital." "Don't give me that nonsense." Burton's face had turned red. "I know what you people are really about. You're nothing but trouble. I've already called the police." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Parents pulled their children closer, and some people began edging toward their cars. The peaceful atmosphere evaporated as Burton continued his tirade. "You're destroying property values, bringing drugs and violence to our streets." He jabbed a finger at Griff's chest. "And you," he turned to Samantha, "you're just as bad harboring these thugs." Samantha felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension, growing louder by the second. 2 police cars pulled into the lot, their lights flashing. The crowd parted as Officer Thompson and his partner stepped out of their vehicles, hands resting on their belts as they surveyed the scene. Officer Thompson approached the group, his face grim but professional. "We've received multiple complaints about noise and unauthorized gathering," he announced, glancing between Burton, Griff, and Samantha. "I'm afraid we'll have to shut this down." "But we have all the permits," Samantha protested, her voice trembling as she fumbled through her folder. "Everything's in order. Look." "The permits aren't the issue," Burton cut in smugly. "These people are a public menace. They're disturbing the peace." Samantha looked around desperately. Families who had been enjoying themselves moments ago were now hurrying to their cars. The band members awkwardly unplugged their instruments, creating a cacophony of feedback that made everyone wince. The cheerful atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by tension and whispers. "Listen," Griff said calmly to Officer Thompson. "We're not looking for trouble. We're raising money for the children's hospital." Officer Thompson shook his head. "I understand, but with the complaints and the potential for escalation." He gestured at Burton, who was still red-faced and agitated. "It's best if we end this now." The bikers began dismantling the setup with quiet efficiency. Tables were folded, chairs stacked, and decorations carefully taken down. Samantha watched helplessly as hours of preparation disappeared in minutes. Her throat felt tight as she saw the donation box being packed away, still full of contributions they'd never get to count. Marie touched her arm gently. "We'll figure something out, honey. Don't let this break you." But Samantha could barely respond. She stood rooted to the spot, watching as the parking lot emptied. The food truck vendors apologetically packed up their unsold goods. The band loaded their equipment into their van. Even the children who had been playing and laughing earlier were gone, their parents hurrying them away as if the bikers might suddenly turn dangerous. Through her blur of tears, she could see people watching from behind curtained windows of nearby shops. Some had their phones out, probably recording everything. Tomorrow, this would be all over the local, social media, another nail in the coffin of her reputation. Bear approached her, his massive frame casting a shadow. "We're sorry, Samantha. We never meant to cause you trouble." His voice was soft, contrasting with his intimidating appearance. "It's not your fault," she managed to say, but her voice cracked. Most of the bikers had mounted their motorcycles now, the rumble of engines filling the air. A few nodded respectfully to her as they pulled away, their chrome glinting in the afternoon sun. The sight of them leaving made her heart sink even further. Only Griff remained, engaged in an intense discussion with Officer Thompson and Burton near the police cars. She couldn't hear what they were saying over the sound of departing vehicles, but Griff's stance was steady, his hands open and calm despite Burton's animated gesturing. Samantha wrapped her arms around herself, feeling smaller with each passing moment. The weight of judgment from the town, the failure of their well-intentioned event, and the uncertainty of what would happen next pressed down on her like a physical burden. But watching Griff stand his ground, refusing to be intimidated or provoked, gave her a tiny spark of hope to cling to. Even as everything fell apart around her, his loyalty remained unshaken. She remained at the edge of her now empty parking lot, watching as Griff continued to advocate for their cause, knowing that without his steadfast support, she would have crumbled completely under the weight of this defeat. The sun was setting when Samantha finally walked into her empty flower shop. The cheerful bell above the door seemed to mock her as she slumped into a chair behind the counter. Her hands still trembled as she tried to sort through the mess of paperwork from the failed event. The rumble of a single motorcycle drew closer, then cut off. A moment later, the bell chimed again as Griff ducked through the doorway. His jaw was clenched tight, and his eyes burned with barely contained anger. "This isn't right," he growled, pacing the small space between displays. "Burton's had it out for us from the start. Did you see how he showed up right when things were going well?" Samantha nodded weakly, brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I should just—" "Don't." Griff's voice was firm but gentle as he stopped pacing. "Don't let them win like this." He pulled up a stool and sat across from her, his massive frame somehow less intimidating as he hunched forward, elbows on his knees. "Look, I've spent my whole life having people judge me before they knew me. Those tattoos? Each one's a story of something I overcame, but I never let anyone tell me I couldn't change, couldn't be better. But my shop—" Samantha gestured helplessly at the walls around them. "This is all I have. If they revoke my license—" "Then we fight back," Griff said, his deep voice steady and sure. "Not with fists or threats. That's what they expect from us. We show them something different." He reached across the counter and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and reassuring. "You taught me that, remember? That day at the gas station?" Samantha managed a small smile. "I just helped someone who needed it." "Exactly." Griff squeezed her hand. "And that changed everything for me. Made me remember what it feels like when someone sees past your rough edges." He stood up suddenly, energy radiating from him as he began to pace again. "So we do something they won't expect, something peaceful, something beautiful." He gestured at the flowers surrounding them. "These are your weapons, Samantha, your message." "What do you mean?" She sat up straighter, caught by the intensity in his voice. "A march." Griff turned to face her. "Right through town. But instead of angry signs or loud protests, we hand out flowers. Every biker carries bouquets. We give them to everyone we meet, even Burton." His eyes sparkled. "Show them who we really are, not who they think we are." Samantha felt something stir in her chest. Hope, maybe, or determination. "A peace offering? Better." Griff smiled. "A reminder that beauty can come from unexpected places. That kindness is stronger than fear." She stood up, energy returning as she moved among her flowers. "We could use white lilies for peace," she mused, touching a petal, "and yellow roses for friendship." "The boys would do it," Griff said. Every single one of them would carry flowers through town for you." He paused. "For us." Samantha turned to face him, really looked at this man who had become such an unexpected ally. His tattoos told stories of pain, but his eyes held nothing but warmth and loyalty. "Okay," she said firmly. "Let's do it. Let's show them what real strength looks like." Griff's smile widened. "I'll call the guys. We'll plan it right. Permits and everything this time. No one can stop us from walking down a public street with flowers." Dawn broke over the small town as Samantha's fingers moved swiftly through another bouquet. Her shop was filled with the sweet scent of fresh flowers, and around her, leather-clad bikers carefully arranged stems and petals under her guidance. "Careful with those lilies, Tommy," she called out to a tattooed man who was wrestling with a particularly stubborn stem. "They bruise easily." "Never thought I'd be doing flower arranging at 6 in the morning, Tommy grumbled good-naturedly, but his thick fingers moved more gently. Griff stood by the door, coordinating with other bikers as they arrived. Each one entered looking uncertain, but left holding bouquets with surprising care. The morning light caught their chrome belt buckles and jacket zippers, sending little sparkles dancing across the shop walls. "That's the last of the permits," Griff announced, waving a stack of papers. "Everything's legal and clear. Police know we're coming, and they can't stop us." Samantha nodded, tying off another bouquet with a white ribbon. Her hands were stained green from hours of work, but she couldn't stop smiling. "I still can't believe how many of you showed up to help." "Told you we take care of our own," Griff replied, his voice gruff but warm. By 8 o'clock, the street outside was lined with motorcycles, each one loaded with flowers. White lilies for peace, yellow roses for friendship, and sprigs of baby's breath adding softness to each arrangement. The morning sun caught the dew still clinging to the petals, making them sparkle. "Remember," Griff addressed the gathered bikers, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "We're here to change minds, not start fights. Someone says something nasty, you smile and offer them flowers anyway." The bikers nodded, their usual tough expressions softened by the bouquets they held. Some had even tucked single blooms into their jacket buttonholes or behind their ears, creating in striking contrast with their leather and denim. As they began their march down Main Street, Samantha walked beside Griff at the front. Her heart pounded with each step, but she held her head high. The rumble of idling motorcycles filled the air as some bikers rode slowly alongside the marchers, their bikes festooned with flowers. People began emerging from shops and houses, drawn by the unusual sight. A mother pulled her children back as they passed, but one little girl waved excitedly. A biker immediately stepped forward, offering her a small bouquet. The mother's tense expression wavered as her daughter clutched the flowers with delight. More townspeople appeared in windows and doorways. Some scowled, others just stared. An elderly man on his porch refused a bouquet with a sharp shake of his head, but then the lady next door accepted one with a hesitant smile, and something in the air seemed to shift. Samantha caught glimpses of Burton, the businessman who had shut down their charity event, watching from his store window. His face was unreadable as the flower-bearing procession passed by. One of the bikers left a bouquet on his doorstep anyway. They continued their peaceful march through the streets, leaving a trail of flowers and surprised faces in their wake. Some recipients stood awkwardly holding their bouquets, as if unsure what to make of this gesture from people they'd always viewed with suspicion. Others quickly carried their flowers inside, but Samantha noticed several being placed in windows, bright spots of color against the glass. The spring morning grew warmer as they walked, and Samantha felt sweat trickle down her back. She glanced at the faces around them, some hostile, some curious, some beginning to soften, and wondered if their message was getting through. The flowers in her arms seemed both a shield and an offering, and she wasn't sure which she needed more. Samantha's heart skipped a beat when she saw Burton, the businessman, striding toward them with several other townspeople. His face was set in stern lines, and behind him followed Mrs. Peterson from the bakery and Mr. Thompson from the hardware store. They formed a small crowd that blocked the sidewalk ahead. Griff's hand found her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "Stay calm," he murmured. The bikers around them tensed but kept holding their flowers, waiting. Burton stopped a few feet away, his arms crossed. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" His voice carried across the morning air, making several passers-by stop to watch. "Sharing some beauty with our neighbors," Samantha replied, proud that her voice didn't shake. She held out a bouquet of white lilies. "Would you like some flowers, Mr. Burton?" He ignored the offering. "This is another publicity stunt, isn't it? Just like that charity event you tried to pull?" "No stunts." Griff stepped forward, his massive frame somehow less intimidating with a bunch of roses in his hands. "Just trying to show you who we really are." Mrs. Peterson, who had been watching silently, moved closer to examine the flowers. "These are beautiful," she said softly, reaching out to touch a petal. "Did you grow these yourself, Samantha?" "Some of them," Samantha nodded. "The roses are from my garden." To everyone's surprise, Mrs. Peterson accepted a bouquet from one of the bikers. "You know," she said, looking at the flowers, "my late husband used to ride. Not with your group, but he loved his motorcycle. Said it made him feel free." The tension in the air began to crack. Mr. Thompson shuffled forward, his curiosity evident. "That's a nice Harley you've got there," he said to one of the bikers. "What year is it?" "'89 Softail," the biker replied, breaking into a smile. "Rebuilt her myself." "No kidding?" Mr. Thompson's eyes lit up. "I used to work on bikes back in my day. Mind if I take a closer look?" More townspeople began approaching, drawn by the peaceful conversation. A young mother accepted flowers for her children, who stared wide-eyed at the bikers' tattoos. One of the bikers knelt down to their level, showing them the small flower he'd tucked into his vest pocket. I may have been too quick to judge," Mrs. Peterson admitted, looking between Samantha and Griff. "We all were, perhaps. It's just that we've heard such stories about people like us," Griff finished for her. His voice was gentle. "We know what people think. That's why we're here, to show you something different." Burton remained silent, watching the scene unfold. His stern expression had softened slightly, though he still hadn't accepted any flowers. Around him, more townspeople were stepping forward, asking questions about the motorcycles, about the bikers' lives, about their charity work. "You really helped rebuild the Andersons' barn last month?" someone asked. "Sure did," Tommy answered proudly. "Whole gang pitched in. That's what we do. Help where we can." "I remember when you fixed Mrs. Wilson's roof," another voice added. "Never asked for anything in return." More voices joined in, sharing stories of quiet kindness they'd witnessed but never acknowledged. The morning air filled with conversation and laughter, the earlier tension dissolving like morning mist in sunlight. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Samantha arranged the last of her flowers in the shop window. The morning's march had left her emotionally drained, but hopeful. She heard the bell above the door chime and turned to find Burton standing awkwardly in the entrance, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Miss Cole," he said, clearing his throat. "Do you have a moment?" Samantha nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. The shop smelled of roses and fresh-cut stems, a comforting scent that seemed to ease some of the tension in Burton's shoulders as he stepped inside. "I've been doing some thinking," he began, running a hand through his graying hair. "About everything that's happened. The charity event, the complaints I made to the council." He paused, looking around at the colorful blooms surrounding them. "I was wrong." Samantha remained quiet, giving him space to continue. A shaft of sunlight caught the dust motes dancing between them, making them sparkle like tiny stars. "You see, when those bikers started showing up, all I could think about were the stories I'd heard. The stereotypes." Burton walked over to a display of lilies, touching one gently. "I never bothered to look past that. Never bothered to see what they were actually doing for our community." "They're good people," Samantha said softly. "They just look a little different on the outside." Burton nodded, a slight smile crossing his face. "I saw that today. The way they were with the children, how they talked about helping the Andersons and Mrs. Wilson." He turned to face her directly. "I saw how much respect they have for you, too. That Griff fellow especially." Samantha felt her cheeks warm slightly. "They've become good friends." "I wanted to apologize," Burton said, straightening his tie. "Not just for the charity event, but for trying to pressure the council about your license. I'll be withdrawing my complaints first thing tomorrow morning." Relief flooded through Samantha, but it wasn't just about her shop anymore. She could see the change in Burton's eyes, the way understanding had replaced judgment. Around them, the flowers seemed to glow in the afternoon light, witnesses to this moment of transformation. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot, not just to me, but to all of us." Burton nodded, glancing out the window where a few townspeople were still chatting with some of the bikers who had stayed behind. "You know, I think this whole thing has shown us something important about our town. How quick we were to judge, how slow to understand." He smiled ruefully. "Maybe we all needed this wake-up call." Samantha watched as Mrs. Peterson outside showed one of the bikers a photo from her wallet, probably of her late husband on his motorcycle. The scene filled her with quiet joy, not just because of Burton's apology, but because she could see the small changes happening all around them. "I appreciate you coming by," she said to Burton. "It takes courage to admit when we're wrong." "Well," he replied, heading toward the door, "sometimes the best thing we can do is acknowledge our mistakes and try to make them right." He paused with his hand on the doorknob. "You've got good friends there, Miss Cole. I'm sorry I couldn't see that sooner." The bell above Samantha's shop door chimed more frequently these days. Morning light streamed through the front windows, catching the mist from her spray bottle as she tended to a display of fresh lilies. Mrs. Thompson, who had once crossed the street to avoid the bikers, now lingered by the counter, sharing stories about her garden. "Those daisies you suggested are doing wonderfully," Mrs. Thompson said, admiring a new arrangement. "And you know, I saw one of your biker friends helping old Mr. Rogers fix his fence yesterday. Such a nice young man." Samantha smiled, remembering how just weeks ago, the same woman had warned others about those dangerous types hanging around the shop. Now, the sight of leather vests and motorcycles barely raised an eyebrow in town. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers. Sarah from the bakery stopped by for wedding consultation, no longer worried about what others might think. Even teenagers from the high school dropped in, drawn by the unusual mix of flowers and the occasional rumble of motorcycles outside. "Business is picking up," Jenny, her part-time helper, observed while wrapping a bouquet. "And did you notice? The council put up those new planters you suggested along Main Street." Samantha nodded, touching the petals of a red rose. The town was changing, slowly but surely. Where there had been whispers and closed doors, now there were waves and open conversations. The bikers had become a familiar sight, helping with everything from heavy lifting to minor repairs around town. As evening approached, the shop quieted. Samantha was arranging the last delivery when she heard the distinctive rumble of Griff's motorcycle. He parked outside, his imposing figure silhouetted against the setting sun. "Thought you might want some company," he said, entering with 2 cups of coffee from the diner. His beard couldn't hide his smile as he handed her one. They sat together on the wooden bench by the window, surrounded by the day's remaining flowers. The street outside had taken on a peaceful quality, painted in soft oranges and purples by the sunset. "Remember when people used to scatter when they saw me coming?" Griff chuckled, his deep voice gentle in the quiet shop. Samantha smiled, warming her hands on the coffee cup. "Now they wave you down for help with their gardens." "Never thought I'd be known as the guy who knows about roses," he said, shaking his head. "The guys give me grief about it, but I see them sneaking peeks at your gardening books when they think no one's looking." The light caught the tattoos on his arms, symbols of a harder life that now seemed less threatening to the townspeople who had gotten to know him. Samantha watched as he carefully moved a delicate orchid that had been too close to the edge of its shelf. "You've changed things here," she said softly. "All of you have." Griff turned to her, his eyes serious. "You changed things first. 1 tank of gas, remember?" They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sun paint the shop in golden light. The flowers cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the evening air carried the mixed scent of coffee and blooms. Outside, a few townspeople walked by, waving through the window at them both. The shop that had once felt like a shelter from loneliness now felt like the heart of something larger. Samantha looked at Griff, seeing past the tough exterior to the friend who had stood by her through everything. His presence, solid and reassuring, had become as much a part of her daily life as the flowers themselves. The morning sun warmed Samantha's face as she unlocked her shop door. A crisp envelope from the town council waited in her mailbox, its official seal gleaming. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, remembering the last letter she'd received from them, the one that had threatened her license. Inside, she found an invitation to attend the next council meeting. This time, the tone was different. They wanted to formally acknowledge her contributions to the community. "What's that you've got there?" Griff's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, holding a box of fresh tulips from the wholesale market. "The council wants to see me," Samantha said, showing him the letter. "But it's good news this time." Griff's weathered face broke into a broad smile. "About time they came around?" Throughout the morning, Samantha watched the town come alive through her shop window. Mrs. Peterson waved as she walked by, stopping to chat with 2 bikers who were fixing a broken bench outside the library. The scene would have been unthinkable just months ago. That afternoon, Samantha entered the council chambers, Griff by her side. The room was packed with familiar faces, shopkeepers, residents, and several members of the motorcycle club. Mayor Wilson, who had once expressed concerns about the bikers, now stood at the podium with a warm smile. "Ms. Cole," the mayor began, his voice carrying through the hushed room. "We've asked you here today because our town has undergone remarkable changes. What started with one act of kindness at a gas station has grown into something extraordinary." Samantha felt Griff's reassuring presence beside her as the mayor continued. "Your flower shop has become more than just a business. It's become a symbol of community unity. The partnership you've formed with the motorcycle club has shown us all that appearances can be deceiving, and that kindness knows no boundaries." The council members nodded in agreement. Mr. Thompson, the businessman who had initially opposed the bikers, stood up. "I want to personally apologize for my previous actions. These past weeks have shown me how wrong I was. The bikers have become valuable members of our community, and it all started with you, Samantha." Councilwoman Davis stepped forward with an official document. "We're pleased to announce that not only is your shop's license secure, but we're naming your establishment as a cornerstone business of our town's revitalization project." Applause filled the chamber. Samantha felt tears welling up in her eyes as she accepted the certificate. Looking around the room, she saw nothing but friendly faces. The baker who now supplied muffins for the bikers' weekend meetings, the librarian who had started a reading program with their help, and countless others whose lives had been touched by this unexpected alliance. Griff squeezed her shoulder gently. His presence reminded her of how far they'd come, from a chance encounter at a gas station to this moment of community celebration. "Thank you," Samantha addressed the council, her voice steady despite her emotions. "But this isn't just about me. It's about everyone in this room who chose to open their hearts and minds. It's about learning to look past the surface and finding the good in unexpected places." The mayor smiled, presenting her with a bouquet of flowers, purchased, fittingly, from her own shop. "Your kindness has transformed our town, Miss Cole. We're grateful for both you and your friends." As Samantha stood there, surrounded by support and acceptance, she felt a profound sense of belonging. The lonely days of running her shop in isolation seemed like a distant memory. Now, her world was filled with genuine connections and unwavering friendship. After the council meeting, Samantha and Griff walked back to her flower shop in comfortable silence. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. Inside the shop, Samantha began arranging flowers while Griff settled into the worn leather chair by the window, his usual spot. "You know," Griff said, his deep voice unusually soft, "watching you at the council today reminded me of when I first found the angels." He ran a hand through his graying beard, his eyes distant. "I wasn't always the man you see now." Samantha set down the roses she was trimming and turned to face him. The usual confidence in his broad shoulders had softened, revealing a vulnerability she rarely saw. "I was homeless for 3 years," he continued, his fingers absently tracing the tattoo on his forearm. "Lived under bridges, behind dumpsters, anywhere I could find shelter. My old man kicked me out when I was 16, said I was nothing but trouble." He paused, swallowing hard. "Maybe I was." Samantha pulled up a stool, sensing the weight of his words. The shop's ceiling fan hummed quietly overhead as Griff gathered his thoughts. "Most people walked right past me like I was invisible. Some days, I thought I really was." His voice grew hoarse. "Then one night, this group of bikers stopped at the gas station where I was panhandling. Instead of shooing me away, they bought me dinner, sat with me, actually listened." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "They were angels. They saw something in me when nobody else did. Helped me get clean, find work at a garage, taught me about loyalty, about being part of something bigger than myself." His weathered hands clasped together. "The brotherhood became the family I never had." "It wasn't easy at first," he continued. "Had to prove myself, earn their trust. But they stood by me, even when I stumbled. They showed me that everyone deserves a second chance." Samantha watched as Griff's eyes grew misty. The tough exterior she'd grown, accustomed to, had cracked open, revealing the deep wells of emotion beneath. "That's why what you did that day at the gas station meant so much," he said, meeting her gaze. "You didn't see a scary biker or judge me by my cuts. You just saw someone who needed help." Samantha felt her own eyes welling up. "I know what it's like to feel invisible," she whispered. "After Mom died, Dad checked out completely. I learned pretty quick that sometimes the loneliest place is right in the middle of a crowd." Griff nodded, understanding flowing between them. "We're both fighters, aren't we? Had to scratch and claw for everything we've got." "Yeah," Samantha agreed softly. "I guess we have." The setting sun painted the shop in warm amber light as they sat together, Two souls who had found their way through darkness to build something meaningful. Without words, they recognized in each other the same resilient spirit, the same determination to create beauty from pain. Griff reached out and squeezed her hand gently, the gesture saying more than words ever could. In that quiet moment, surrounded by flowers and fading sunlight, Samantha felt the walls around her heart soften just a little more. The morning light filtered through the flower shop's windows, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden floor from the crystal wind chimes. Samantha was arranging a bouquet of sunflowers when Griff walked in, his face unusually pale. He held his phone in his hand like it might bite him. "Karen called," he said, his voice rough. "My ex-wife." Samantha's fingers stilled on the flower stems. She'd known Griff was once married, but he rarely spoke about it. What did she want? Griff settled into his leather chair, running a hand through his beard. Says she wants to meet, talk things through after all these years. He looked down at his boots. Says she needs closure. The word closure hung in the air between them. Samantha moved to the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. "Are you going? To see her?" "Think I have to." He looked up at her, his eyes troubled. "Some ghosts don't rest until you face them." Samantha nodded, trying to ignore the knot forming in her stomach. She knew nothing about Karen except that their marriage had ended badly, long before Griff joined the Angels. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon. She's passing through town." He studied Samantha's face. "You're awful quiet." She forced a smile, but her hands twisted the apron strings. I don't know how to feel about it." The admission came out softer than she intended. "I mean, she was your wife." Griff stood up and crossed to her, his large frame casting a shadow over the counter. "Sam, that was a lifetime ago. I was a different person then. We both were." "I know." She busied herself organizing the ribbon spools. "It's just, what if she wants to get back together?" Griff's laugh was gentle. "That ship sailed so long ago it's probably reached China by now." Despite herself, Samantha smiled, but uncertainty still gnawed at her. "Will you tell me about her someday?" "If you want." He reached across the counter and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "But right now she's just someone I need to make peace with. Nothing more." Samantha squeezed his hand, trying to convey understanding she wasn't sure she felt. "I'll be here when you get back." "I know you will." He smiled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "That's one of the things I love most about you." The next day crawled by like molasses. Samantha threw herself into work, creating arrangements with fierce concentration. But her mind kept wandering to Griff, imagining him sitting across from his ex-wife, dredging up old memories. When the bell above the shop door chimed late that afternoon, she looked up to find Griff standing there. His face was drawn, and his eyes held a faraway look she'd never seen before. "Hey," she said softly. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and pulled her into a hug. She could feel him trembling slightly. "It's done," he murmured into her hair. "We said what needed saying. Made our peace." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes clear now and certain. But seeing her just confirmed what I already knew. "What's that?" "That the past is exactly where it belongs, in the past." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "I've got something better now, something real." Samantha leaned into his touch, feeling the knot in her stomach finally begin to unravel. The ghost of Karen might always hover at the edges of their story, but she realized that didn't diminish what she and Griff had built together. The morning started with whispers. Samantha heard them as she walked to her shop, hushed conversations that stopped when she got too close. Something was brewing in the small town, and she could feel it in the air like an approaching storm. By mid-morning, Mrs. Henderson from the local garden club stormed into the flower shop, her face pinched with disapproval. "Did you hear what those bikers of yours did last night?" Samantha looked up from arranging roses. "What are you talking about?" "The park!" Mrs. Henderson's voice rose an octave. "It's a complete mess. Beer bottles everywhere, trash scattered all over, and everyone knows it was them." Samantha's heart sank. She knew the bikers hadn't done anything. They'd been helping her with inventory until late last night. But before she could defend them, more accusations followed. Throughout the day, people trickled in, each with a new complaint. The park was just the beginning. Someone claimed they'd seen bikers threatening kids at the playground. Another swore they were dealing drugs behind the library. None of it was true, but the stories spread like wildfire. Griff arrived just as Samantha was closing up, his face grim. "Heard about the rumors," he said, leaning against the counter. "Some folks are trying real hard to run us out of town." "But why now?" Samantha asked, frustration clear in her voice. "Things were getting better. People were starting to accept you." "Maybe that's exactly why," Griff replied, his deep voice thoughtful. "Change scares some people. They'd rather believe the worst than admit they might have been wrong about us." Outside, a group of townspeople had gathered, led by Tom Watson, the hardware store owner. Their voices carried through the windows, demanding that the bikers leave town for good. Griff straightened up, his massive frame casting a shadow in the dimming light. "Well, guess it's time to show them what we're really about." He pulled out his phone and made a few calls. Within 30 minutes, the rumble of motorcycles filled the air as dozens of Hell's Angels arrived. The crowd outside grew quieter, watching warily as the bikers parked their machines. But instead of confrontation, Griff led his brothers toward the park. Each biker carried trash bags and cleaning supplies. Samantha followed, her heart swelling with pride, as she watched these tough men, covered in tattoos and leather, begin methodically cleaning every inch of the littered park. They worked through the evening, picking up not just recent trash, but years of accumulated debris. They fixed broken swings, repaired benches, and even planted new flowers along the pathways. Some of them had brought power tools and began repairing the old gazebo that had been falling apart for years. The watching crowd slowly transformed from hostile to curious. A few children ventured closer, fascinated by the bikers' tattoos and machines. One little girl offered her half-eaten sandwich to a burly biker named Bear, who accepted it with a gentle smile that transformed his fierce face. As the sun began to set, the park looked better than it had in decades. The bikers gathered their tools, their clothes dirty from honest work. Tom Watson approached Griff, his earlier anger replaced by something like shame. We were wrong," he admitted, looking around at the transformed park. "All this time, we've been judging you without really seeing you." Samantha watched as more townspeople stepped forward, their hostility melting away in the face of such selfless service. The bikers had proved themselves not with words or threats, but with actions that spoke volumes about who they really were. The morning light streamed through the windows of Samantha's flower shop, casting rainbow patterns through the crystal vases on display. She stood at her workbench, arranging a bouquet of sunflowers and roses, when she noticed something different about the street outside. People weren't hurrying past her shop anymore. They were stopping, waving, smiling through the windows. Mrs. Henderson, who had once been so quick to judge, pushed open the door with her hip, carrying a fresh-baked apple pie. "For you and those wonderful friends of yours," she said, placing it on the counter. "My Harold says the park hasn't looked this good since we were teenagers." Samantha smiled, touching one of the sunflower petals gently. "It's amazing what people can do when they work together." Throughout the morning, more townspeople stopped by. Tom Watson from the hardware store brought her a new set of garden tools. "For the shop?" he said gruffly, but his eyes were kind. "Figured you might need these, what with all the new business coming your way." He was right. Business had nearly doubled since the park cleanup. But it wasn't just about the flowers anymore. Her shop had become a gathering place, where bikers in leather jackets chatted with elderly ladies about rose cultivation, and where children stopped by after school to hear Bear's increasingly elaborate stories about his adventures on the road. Around noon, Griff walked in, ducking his head slightly under the doorframe as always. He carried a newspaper which he laid on the counter with a grin. "You seen this yet?" Samantha picked it up, her eyes widening at the headline. "Local florist and biker gang transform town's heart." The article praised the unexpected partnership that had brought the community together, complete with photos of the park cleanup and quotes from townspeople about how their prejudices had been challenged and changed. "I never thought," Samantha began, her voice catching. "When I helped you that day at the gas station, I was just doing what felt right. I never imagined it would lead to all this." Griff's weathered face softened. "Sometimes the smallest kindnesses have the biggest ripples. You taught us that." The bell above the door chimed as more people entered, a mix of townspeople and bikers, all chatting easily with each other. Someone had brought cookies, another had coffee, and soon the shop was filled with the warm buzz of conversation and laughter. Mayor Thompson himself stopped by, shaking hands with both Samantha and Griff. "You've shown us what community really means," he said, looking around at the unlikely gathering. This town needed that reminder. Samantha watched as Bear entertained a group of children, showing them how to make paper flowers while their parents looked on with fond amusement. In the corner, Mrs. Henderson was deep in conversation with two leather-clad bikers about her secret pie crust recipe. "We should have a proper celebration," Samantha said suddenly, turning to Griff. "To thank everyone who stood by us, who gave us a chance to prove that people are more than their appearances." Griff nodded, his eyes twinkling. "I think that's exactly what this town needs. One more reminder that we're all in this together." As they began planning the celebration, Samantha looked around her shop, at the flowers, at the people, at the way sunlight caught the crystal vases and scattered rainbows across everyone's faces. She'd always thought her little flower shop was just a business, but now she understood it had become something more, a symbol of how beauty could grow in the most unexpected places and how hearts could change when given the chance. Samantha sat at her desk, going through the day's orders. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the shop windows, making the flowers glow like stained glass. A steady stream of customers had kept her busy all day, but now, in the quiet moments before closing, she could finally catch her breath. She picked up a small card that had been left on her counter earlier. It was from little Tommy, the hardware store owner's son, thanking her for teaching him about different flowers. His crayon drawing showed stick figures of bikers surrounded by colorful blooms. She pinned it to her bulletin board, already crowded with similar notes and photos from townspeople. The bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Henderson walked in with her knitting group, the same women who, months ago, had crossed the street to avoid the bikers. Now they settled into the comfortable chairs Samantha had set up in the corner, pulling out their needles and yarn. "Hope you don't mind us setting up camp here again, dear," Mrs. Henderson called out. "The light's so much better than at the community center." "You're always welcome," Samantha replied, meaning it with all her heart. As she worked on a wedding arrangement, she could hear them chatting about Bear's motorcycle maintenance workshop scheduled for the weekend. The image made her smile. Proper Mrs. Henderson, learning about spark plugs from a tattooed biker named Bear. The door chimed again, and Griff walked in, carrying a box of tools he'd borrowed. His presence filled the shop, but not in the intimidating way it once had. Now it felt like comfort, like coming home. "Ladies," he nodded to the knitting group, who waved back cheerfully. "Just in time," Samantha said. "I was about to close up." She watched as he carefully put away the tools, noting how at ease he seemed in her space. The shop had become a second home to many of the bikers, and somehow that felt exactly right. "Hard to believe how different things are now," she said softly, more to herself than to Griff. He looked up, understanding in his eyes. "You did that, you know. Took a chance on us when nobody else would." "We did it together," she corrected him, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The knitting group packed up their things, saying their goodbyes. Mrs. Henderson paused at the door. "Don't forget about the community picnic next weekend," she reminded them. "The whole town's coming." After they left, Samantha and Griff stepped outside onto the small patio she'd created behind the shop. The sunset painted everything in warm hues, and the evening air was sweet with the scent of flowers. "The boys are heading out tomorrow," Griff said quietly. "Got some business up north." Samantha nodded, having known this was coming. The Hells Angels were nomads at heart, after all. But the thought didn't fill her with the same anxiety it might have months ago. "When will you be back?" she asked, watching the colors change in the sky. "Couple of weeks, maybe 3? He turned to face her. "But you know we'll always come back. Your family now." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in deeper shades of purple and red. The world felt different now. Fuller, richer, more complete. What had started with a simple act of kindness had grown into something beautiful and unexpected, like a garden blooming in the most unlikely place. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as the distant rumble of motorcycles grew louder. Samantha stepped out of her flower shop, her heart both heavy and full. She'd known this moment was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. The familiar formation of Hell's Angels rounded the corner, led by Griff on his gleaming black motorcycle. The thundering procession came to a stop in front of her shop, the engines quieting one by one until only the gentle idle of Griff's bike remained. Mrs. Henderson and several other townspeople emerged from nearby shops, gathering on the sidewalk. Some held flowers from Samantha's shop, while others carried small packages, parting gifts for the men who had become such an unexpected but vital part of their community. Griff dismounted first, removing his helmet. His weathered face broke into a warm smile as he approached Samantha. The other bikers followed suit, creating a semicircle around them. "Brought you something," Griff said, reaching into his saddlebag. He pulled out a leather vest, similar to the ones worn by the club members, but uniquely decorated with intricate flower designs burned into the leather. "Bear did the artwork himself. Thought you should have a piece of us to keep." Samantha ran her fingers over the detailed work, her vision blurring with tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered, clutching the vest to her chest. One by one, the bikers came forward to say their goodbyes. Bear, the gentle giant who had taught the local kids about motorcycle maintenance, gave her a bear hug that lifted her off her feet. Razor, who had helped her reorganize her entire inventory system, pressed a small wooden box into her hands. Inside was a collection of rare flower seeds he'd gathered during their travels. Tommy, the hardware store owner's son, broke away from his father and ran up to the bikers, holding drawings he'd made for each of them. The tough men's faces softened as they accepted their portraits, carefully tucking them into their jackets. "You changed this town," Samantha said, looking at each of them in turn. "You showed everyone that kindness can come from unexpected places. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." Griff shook his head. "You're the one who changed things, Samantha. That day at the gas station, you saw past what everyone else sees. You gave us a chance when nobody else would." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her eyes misty. "You boys come back and visit us, you hear? My knitting circle won't be the same without our motorcycle maintenance discussions." The laughter that followed was warm and genuine, bridging the gap between two worlds that had once seemed so far apart. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles, Griff lingered for a moment. "We'll be back," he promised, his voice gruff with emotion. "You've got a whole brotherhood looking out for you now." The engines roared to life in unison, the sound echoing off the buildings of Main Street. Samantha stood in her doorway, the leather vest still pressed against her heart, watching as they formed their familiar formation. Griff gave one final nod, and then they were moving, a parade of chrome and leather gleaming in the morning sun. She watched until they disappeared around the corner, the rumble of their engines fading into the distance. The small crowd of townspeople gradually dispersed, leaving Samantha alone in her doorway. But she didn't feel lonely. The warmth in her heart told her that some goodbyes weren't really endings at all. The autumn breeze rustled through the new flower boxes outside Samantha's shop, carrying the sweet scent of late-blooming roses. 6 months had passed since the bikers rode away, but their impact remained everywhere she looked. The leather vest hung proudly near her workstation, its flower designs catching the morning light. Mrs. Henderson waved through the window as she passed by, carrying her signature apple pie to the weekly community dinner, and tradition that had started during those transformative days with the bikers. The town had kept many of the positive changes alive, proving that sometimes it took just one spark to light a lasting flame. Samantha moved between the displays, adjusting arrangements with practiced care. Her business had nearly doubled since last spring. The shop window now featured a small sign that read, "All welcome here," something that would have seemed risky before, but now felt natural and right. The bell above the door chimed as Tommy, the hardware store owner's son, bounded in. "Miss Samantha, Dad says to give you these." He placed a stack of letters on the counter, each bearing different postmarks from across the country. "Thank you, Tommy," she smiled, recognizing the familiar handwriting. The bikers wrote regularly, sharing stories from the road and updates about their lives. Bear had started teaching art classes to troubled youth in Nevada. Razor had opened a small motorcycle repair shop in Arizona, offering free services to those who couldn't afford repairs. As she arranged a spectacular bouquet of sunflowers and dahlias, Samantha thought about how different her life was now. The loneliness that had once seemed permanent had given way to a sense of belonging she'd never known before. Her flower shop had become more than just a business. It was a gathering place where people from all walks of life felt welcome. The local business association had elected her as their vice president last month. The same people who had once threatened to revoke her license now sought her advice on community matters. She'd used her position to start a mentorship program, pairing experienced business owners with struggling newcomers, just as Griff and his brothers had done for her. Griff's latest letter sat open on her desk, filled with his characteristic, straightforward wisdom. "Sometimes the smallest act of kindness," he'd written, "can start a chain reaction that changes everything." She thought back to that day at the gas station, how such a simple gesture had transformed not just her life, but an entire community. The afternoon sun streamed through the shop windows, casting rainbow patterns through the crystal vases on display. Samantha added the final touch to her arrangement, a single white rose in the center of the sunflowers. Each flower seemed to tell its own story of beauty and resilience, much like the unexpected friendship between a lonely florist and a group of bikers who had proved that judgments often hide the truest hearts. Working with the flowers, Samantha felt a deep sense of peace. Her hands moved deliberately, each stem finding its perfect place in the arrangement. The shop hummed with the quiet energy of regular customers coming and going, exchanging warm greetings and sharing stories of their days. The lessons she'd learned about kindness, loyalty, and redemption had become part of who she was now. They showed in every bouquet she created, every smile she shared, every moment she chose to see past appearances to the heart beneath. As she adjusted the last bloom in the arrangement, Samantha glanced out at the street where it had all begun and smiled, knowing that kindness truly does change the world. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.